A few weeks before his 50th birthday, Arthur Less opens his mail and finds something that feels almost cruel in its timing, an invitation to his ex-lover's wedding. Not a prize, not a career breakthrough, not proof that life is finally coming together, just a beautiful reminder that someone he once loved deeply has moved on. Someone once asked what failure feels like. I think it feels a lot like standing in a grocery store, pretending you are comparing brands, when you are really checking which discounted item is closest to expiration. It is quiet. It is ordinary, and that is exactly why it hurts. Today, I want to talk about a novel that understands that kind of pain with surprising tenderness. It is Less by the American writer Andrew Sean Greer. This is a light novel, at least on the surface. It is not especially long. The prose has an easy, playful rhythm. There is wit, charm, and a gentle absurdity that makes the whole book feel airy and alive. But beneath that lightness, Less is dealing with things that are not light at all. It is about aging, heartbreak, disappointment, and the quiet grief that comes when you realize you are no longer young, no longer full of endless possibility, and no longer certain the future will be better than the present. And once you reach that point, what do you do with your life? How do you understand yourself? How do you keep loving other people without becoming bitter? How do you keep going? That is the moment this novel enters. The main character is Arthur Less, a novelist who has not exactly failed, but has never quite succeeded either. When he was younger, he might have been called promising. But as he approaches 50, promising is no longer a word anyone uses. He has published books, but none has made much of an impact. His name still appears from time to time, but often not because of his work. Sometimes people remember him more for a past relationship with a more famous poet. Arthur Less is a gay man. He has loved seriously and built a life with someone before. But at the beginning of the story, the reality he faces is not graceful. His career is underwhelming. His youth feels distant. His relationship is over, and his former partner is getting married. That wedding invitation becomes the emotional engine of the novel. It forces Arthur to confront something he has not fully accepted, that some relationships are truly over, and time does not automatically make that easier. You can act calm. You can say the right polite things. You can convince others you have moved on. But real pain does not disappear just because enough time has passed. Sometimes it waits quietly, and then one day it rises again. To avoid attending the wedding, Arthur makes a decision that is both ridiculous and deeply human. He goes through a pile of literary invitations he once ignored, and suddenly accepts all of them. A conference here, an award there, a teaching opportunity somewhere else, one event after another. And just like that, he begins a long journey around the world. From New York to Mexico, from Italy to Germany, then on to Morocco, India, and Japan. On the surface, it looks glamorous, cultured, almost enviable. But emotionally, this is not a triumphant journey. It is a carefully disguised escape. Arthur is not leaving because he is curious about the world. He is leaving because he cannot bear to stay where he is. And this is one of the most honest parts of the book. We often think we travel because we are searching for something new, but sometimes we leave simply because we do not know how to face what we already have. Elsewhere is not always a calling. Sometimes it is a hiding place. As Arthur travels, he moves through different cities and different versions of himself. He attends events, gives interviews, teaches, meets new people, and occasionally falls into brief, fleeting relationships. But the journey does not erase the past. If anything, distance sharpens memory. The farther he goes, the clearer certain old feelings become. In Mexico, he is drawn back into memories of a past relationship. Through conversations and questions, he is forced to revisit a love that once shaped him deeply, not just romantically, but emotionally and intellectually. To love someone brilliant can make you feel for a while that you are closer to brilliance yourself. But when that relationship ends, what remains is not just love. It is an afterglow, a long, complicated emotional shadow. Later, in Germany, Arthur meets a younger man. For a brief moment, the connection softens loneliness and makes him feel seen again. But the novel never turns this into a rescue. Because if the deeper wound is still inside you, no new person can replace what you lost. A new connection may comfort you, but comfort is not the same as healing. And this leads to one of the most important truths in the book. The real issue is not who stands beside you, but how you see yourself when no one is there to reflect you back. Arthur is not only struggling with an ex, he is struggling with age. And the sadness of aging here is quiet, restrained, and deeply human. This is not the explosive pain of young heartbreak. It is something softer and heavier at the same time. The realization that time is real, that possibilities narrow, and that one day you wake up living not in potential, but in reality. For Arthur, this feeling carries even more weight. Coming from an earlier generation, aging as a gay man is not just about getting older, it is also about surviving, about living into a future that once felt uncertain. So when he approaches 50, he is not only asking what comes next, he is asking whether he can still be loved, whether he can live with dignity, whether he can accept being ordinary. That is the deeper question at the center of Less. What happens when someone realizes they are not young, not exceptional, and not even sure they deserve love anymore? There is a key moment when Arthur plans to spend his 50th birthday in the Sahara. Because 50 is not just a number here, it is the emotional center of the story. When we are young, life feels open and unfinished. We believe we can still rewrite everything. But at a certain point, we begin to understand that much of life has already happened, and some possibilities will never return. Yet the novel refuses to become heavy or tragic. It keeps its quiet humor. Plans fall apart, moments turn awkward, and life refuses to become poetic on command. And that is its wisdom. Real life rarely delivers perfect meaning in perfect moments. What we get instead is mess, discomfort, fatigue, and ordinary reality. But inside that reality, Arthur begins to see something new. Maybe life does not need to be perfect to be meaningful. Maybe love does not need to last forever to be real. One of the most beautiful ideas in the book is this: the end of a relationship does not automatically mean it failed. Two people can share years of meaning, and even if they part, that time does not lose its value. We are used to judging everything by its ending, but maybe some things matter simply because they happened, because they were real, because they changed us. As the story continues, Arthur realizes something painful and true. What we mourn is often not just another person. It is the version of ourselves we were with them, the version that felt chosen, bright, and full of possibility. But Less does not stay in that sadness. It carries a quiet hope, the idea that even if life has not turned out the way you imagined, it is still possible to live, to connect, and to be loved. By the end, Arthur returns home. He is not transformed into someone new, but he is no longer the same. He understands love more gently, failure more softly, and begins to treat himself with kindness. That is what makes this novel so powerful. It gives dignity to ordinary people. Arthur is not a hero. He is hesitant, awkward, imperfect, and that is exactly why he feels real. Most of us are like that. We hesitate, we miss chances, we run away, and we hope to be braver someday. And this novel does not judge that, it simply accepts it. You do not have to live beautifully to have truly lived. You do not have to be impressive to matter. If I had to describe Less in one sentence, it is this: it is a story about how a person, in the middle of aging, loss, and ordinariness, slowly rediscovers what love really means. And that love is not just romantic. It is connection, memory, companionship, and the quiet realization that life is still worth returning to. That is why, despite everything it talks about heartbreak, aging, failure, it does not leave you feeling heavy. Instead, it leaves a quiet kind of brightness. It reminds you that meaning is not reserved for the successful, that even later in life, you can still understand yourself, accept yourself, and believe in love again. Because 50 is not the end. Heartbreak is not the end. Becoming ordinary is not the end. Sometimes it is the beginning of a more honest, softer life. A life where you stop asking whether you have won and start asking whether you can live peacefully with who you are. That is Less, a novel that feels light but is never shallow, funny but never careless, a story about loss that somehow leads to hope. And if you are in a quiet, uncertain phase of life, if you are asking complicated questions about love, age, or the future, this book may not give you answers, but it may sit beside you for a while, and sometimes that is exactly what we need.